Back here on the Exit 52 podcast with Jeremy. I'm going to call you a Baltimore radio star.
Wow.
Jeremy Conn, the host of the Lowdown with Jeremy Conn, weekdays 6 to 9 on 105.7 The Fan. Jeremy, thanks for coming on, man.
Appreciate it. I got to get my wife to come down here so she knows I'm a star now. No, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, so we had, our good friend Johnny Minidakis on a couple episodes ago. He was our first guest. We thought, you'd be a nice number 2 hitter right behind him. I know you're a big number 2 guy anyway.
Yeah.
So again, we just anyone our age kind of grew up, stuck in traffic, listening, anytime between 2 and 6, we'd find you and Scott on air. And we talked about it in your intro before you got on a little bit, like just the relationship you and Scott had, where you would say something and he would have no idea what to do. And even if he had an idea what to do, he didn't want to touch whatever you were saying. Just made you guys so great. And like listening to you guys was awesome.
Well, no, I appreciate that. It was funny because Scott popped on today because Vince Bagley passed away, which, Vince is a Baltimore icon and Scott follows kind of in the same footsteps there. And I had Bruce Cunningham on telling stories, and I was telling him that because he said, you're one of the lucky ones because Scott is hilarious. And when you're off the air, like, I'm sure he gets you laughing. And I'm like, yeah, he's got one of the best sense of humor that I don't know why sometimes it didn't come across on the air. But one of my favorite stories, and I'll tell you briefly, my wife and I were trying to have kids. My wife has MS, so there's a lot of complications with it. But we went through the whole fertility thing, which means, you're going into a room and you're trying to produce something to help make a baby. Let's just put it that way, because I'll get to the more descriptive part of this in a second. I don't know what I can and can't say on this podcast, but I'll keep it clean until one of you guys says
you
something.
can let it fly. You can let it fly.
So I had a dentist appointment and a fertility clinic appointment in the same day, and Scott looks over to me and says, just make sure you don't jerk off in the dentist chair. You know what? One of the best lines ever, man. It was hilarious. But so I'm very fortunate to work with him. And some of the jokes he didn't get, there's a lot of stuff, like I throw in a movie reference or a TV reference that would fly over his head and he'd have no idea. And then someone would send me a text or an email. I was like, oh, man, that was great. So I always appreciated that.
And that now your road to sports radio, and I know you've talked about it a bunch, but just to kind of go over that, you had a very non-traditional route to sports radio. Can you go into how you ended up behind a microphone?
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy. Like you don't look at me and think basketball player, but I walked on to Towson's basketball team back in 1997, and then proceeded to get into a car accident a couple of weeks later. Now, didn't get hurt, but I totaled my car in Towson because they overbooked in 1997, and I was a local kid. They made me commute. So I had this trashy Subaru with no front bumper and an exhaust leak. When I pulled up next to you, it sounded like a Harley. It was so loud. But and this is a true story. I totaled the car by rear-ending someone checking out a girl outside of the Bel Air Athletic Club, walking to the light, and they had this gigantic trailer hitch, and it went through my radiator. And that car was such a piece of junk that losing the radiator made it totaled. So you couldn't do it. It was a 1984 Subaru. But basketball was my first love, and I was really fast. I was 5'10", 140 pounds, wet and wearing boots, but I could play. And so I walked on to Towson, get in the car accident. They end up telling me I don't have enough credits to play because you have to have 12 credits. And I dropped 2 classes because I couldn't commute every day. And the roundabout thing that happened was I ended up playing in some competitive basketball leagues in the area. And some of the guys I was playing with, I was talking to about, they were talking about sports. And I was correcting all their statistics because I was a numbers guy. I was a math guy in college. I thought I was going to be a math teacher one day. So I'm like correcting all their numbers, and they're talking about where this guy went to college. I'm like, no, he didn't. He didn't go there. Jerry Rice went to Mississippi Valley State, not Mississippi State. And they're looking at me as some 17-year-old kid or 18 at that time. Like, who the hell does this guy think he is? And once they went back and checked that I was right on all the things I was correcting them on, they came back and said, you know a lot about sports. I'm like, yeah, I tend to remember numbers and if I see something, I remember it. They're like, would you ever think about sports talk radio? And then I asked him, so what is that? He says, well, there's guys that just talk about sports on the radio. I said, that sounds so stupid. Like, who's going to listen to people talk in their car? And then I was delivering pizzas at the time, and I turned on the station, listened to Bob Haney, listened to Mark Mussina, who's Mike Mussina's brother. And then I fell in love with it, being in my car so much. I sent an email, shot in the dark, said, hey, are you guys looking for any interns? Now, I was thinking about going back to JUCO and trying to play some basketball, but I was really interested in sports talk radio. So they hired me as an intern. I worked for free for almost a year. And then when all the interns left and I was still hanging around and I didn't go back to college, they offered me $8 an hour to produce the morning show. And I was like, shit, yeah, it's an $8 an hour raise. I'm in, man. Like it was golden. So I worked for Nestor for 6 years, and then he promptly fired me for no good reason because he's a piece of garbage. And then I wound up on my feet over at 105.7, which was 1300 at the time, and just kind of worked my way up. And I was just always in the right place at the right time, to be honest. And a lot of our business, as you guys will see, it's about who you know, not what you know. It's just about being there when someone else isn't. So I always tried to put myself up to do as much as I could. And then that way I wouldn't be expendable. But you just never know what's going to happen in this industry from week to week.
And now, so you've kind of seen how the landscape of Baltimore radio and just, I guess, covering sports in general has gone. What are your big takeaways on it, you know, the up and coming Baltimore sports media and then what it is now?
See, I love what's happening because, you know, I was one of those guys. I just got an opportunity at a radio station instead of grabbing some friends and saying, hey, let's put a podcast together, right? I always give guys grief that I worked with or that are in our industry that look down upon anybody else that can find a way to get a microphone and find an audience. I mean, that's all it is you're trying to find an audience of people that want to listen to you. And we kind of, in radio, you have it established already. Like, you know, you have it set up where other guys, you have to gain your followers. And I think it's cool. I love seeing, like, I know a lot about sports and I'll put my sports knowledge up against anybody, but it doesn't mean I'm going to win every time I'm arguing with someone or I'm always going to be right. There are plenty of like unbelievably intelligent people out there. And I think back to how I started, you know, like I would have been doing the same thing. So does that make me any less knowledgeable now? No, I mean, sports are fun. So it's like, it's one of those things where, you know, you want to, if you're following it, you're going to enjoy it and having a chance to talk about it. I like arguing. It doesn't have to get overly aggressive. I like debating, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, just sitting here and for me, being a guy that likes to pick games as well, that's a fun part and a cool aspect of it. But I love seeing guys get a chance. And I've always tried to do it in this industry as well as, you know, like even Eric and Banks, you know, having you guys on the show. I don't know that it's the norm for a lot of people. I think it's starting to be where you're seeing more people probably hit you up. And then Barstool kind of had that, you know, from a lot of people where they're like, oh, I don't want to be associated with that, which is just stupid. You know, it's like there's so many different outlets out there for people to get their point across. And I used to have a guy that came on from, God, what's the name of that website that it blew up? I can't even think of it. Anyway, one of the sports blog sites that ended up, NBC ended up buying it, I think. Why can't I think of it? My brain is fried. I was doing this at the end of my show tonight. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? It'll come to me in a second. But they had guys working for them basically for free, just writing stories and putting it up. Bleacher Report. Yeah. Okay. So, you know what I mean? Like, and they're like, why are you going to have that guy on from Bleacher Report? I'm like, I'm giving guys opportunities. You never know who's going to be good. Like, you know, when you think about it, Adam Schefter started off at a small paper. He ended up covering Alabama, winds up with the Denver Post, and now he's an NFL insider. So, I know I'm rambling here, but like, I just think that it's pretty cool hearing all these different voices and people having a chance to actually say what their opinion is, whether it's right or wrong. Cause I listen to some guys like, what the hell's he talking about? You know, but yeah, I think it's a fun industry and it's really cool to see guys get chances.
Oh, for sure. And sorry to cut you off there, Taylor. It was cool how you, really cool how you just kind of laid it out there. And we kind of led into this interview on the first half of our podcast, just talking about how Eric was really, really thankful for the way that you were one of the first people who really, you know, approached us with open arms, because we're kind of the bloggers. We're kind of the guys that the older folk kind of look down upon and they don't really respect our opinion. And you've always just had open eyes and open arms. So we're definitely appreciative of that. And with that said, you mentioned during that let's call it a monologue, that you would put your sports knowledge up against anybody's. We have a co-host here who has actually been on television for sports trivia purposes. I would love to see you and Taylor Smythe go head to head. I don't know what question to potentially ask you to at this point, but I do know one that Taylor knows the answer to, so I'm just going to quiz you on this. Do you know who led the 1990s in hits in Major League Baseball?
Oh, this is Banks' big question to everybody.
My favorite
this is
trivia question.
Trivia question.
The 1990s in hits?
Who had the most hits in the 1990s?
Is it Ricky Henderson?
Nope.
You say that's the one that jumps off the
well, you're just thinking about how long he played too. You're trying to get somebody that played all 10 years there.
All 10 years, yeah.
Which helps.
Sure. Well, he can come back to you. And I mean, Taylor looked like he had a question teed up, but you can chew on it for a bit.
Is it a local guy? Is that why I should be ashamed of missing this?
No, you should not be ashamed to miss this one anyway. I did not know it off the bat either.
All right.
Jeremy, I was interested in, you obviously have this and you build this rapport with listeners, right? And you look for that audience and things like that. And that fascinates me as a radio person because you have to straddle a line between wanting to sort of please your listeners while also when you get callers kind of going back and forth with them and having those debates and things like that. Where do you find that line is sort of drawn for you in building that really loyal listener base that comes back to you show after show? That's sort of your base of what you kind of do.
Well, I think you could argue with people and have a totally, have a disagreement over something and not be a jackass about it, right? I can be kind to you and have you back. Like I've had arguments with Bob in Parkville who called in tonight, and he's been saying like the nicest things ever about me. I had an argument with him where he told me I rode side saddle for Peyton Manning, and I had to look it up what it meant. And I guess it meant I was gay for him, which, okay, whatever. But so we had this big argument. But, the sad part about my job realistically is and how much effort and time I put into it. Like when I was doing 2 to 6, I was at the radio station by 11 o'clock or noon every day. And the goal was to always try to leave right at 6 if I could, but sometimes that doesn't happen as well. But I talk to callers that call my show daily, a couple times a week, whatever it is, more than I talk to my own family. I've been to 4 callers' funerals now in my 20 years in doing radio. And
wow.
None hit harder than, and Eric knows this, than the last one. But it's weird because like I'm one of those guys too. Like if you met me at a bar, you'd be, and let's say you were a fan of the station, like I'm going to offer to buy you a beer more times than not. And if you buy me a drink, I'm definitely going to try to buy you one. And then on top of it, I'll sit there and have a conversation with you. My wife hates going out with me kind of in the area that we're in, that we've been here for so long, because she knows I'm going to run into somebody that I know or knows me. And then she gets the short end of the stick, which we end up arguing about, because I don't want anybody to walk away with a bad opinion of me. Now I'm going to do my best to make sure that doesn't happen, but it's I always say that's a you problem if you end up not liking me. But it's just people are people, and I always want to treat people the way I would want to be treated. And I know that sounds corny and cliche, but it's kind of how I live my life. And when it comes down to the callers, whether it's disagreements or we have goofball callers, some of those guys I like to have fun with, and I do like to poke fun at them without hopefully being a total a-hole to them. Sometimes it does happen. I cross the line. We all do.
David Salisbury.
Oh God, that guy's an idiot. So no, but he just says the most outrageous things. And like even Bubba and Bowie, I make fun of him more than anybody that's called the station. And he just keeps coming back for more. And I tell him all the time, I say, I just do that joking with you, right? He's like, yeah. And I was like, well, you're still an idiot, or just whatever. You bust his chops.
Yeah, so, he's great.
So no, I hope that kind of answers the question, but I'd love to leave it open. Even when I started the night show, because truth be told, and I mean, Eric knows a little bit more about this since we've talked about it. Like I told the radio station when they were telling me they're moving to nights that I was quitting. I was like, I'm not doing this. There's a lot that went with moving to nights that I can't get into, but I didn't want to. I was pissed off. I was angry. I felt like I should have been given an opportunity to run that drive time. And, but there's other opportunities that have opened up since going to nights, and the fact that I now get to control a show and do whatever I want, in reason, of course, but that's kind of appealing, and I like it. And it's actually freed up some things that I can do. The one issue I had was, especially with my kids, and they play basketball, that I got a son that's in college now, and I got another one that's a senior this year. So I don't want to miss any of his basketball games. Well, coronavirus took care of most of that. So if I do see him play, it'll probably be next year. But that's like all of this kind of coincides. So when I started the night show, I said, I want to make it about callers. Call in, be a part of the show. And, it's your opportunity. I'm not going to cut you off. You disagree with me, you call me an idiot, say it, man. Get it out. Get everything you need out, and then we'll go from there.
And now I feel like we can't talk about, obviously you've harped on it, the callers, the big one being Mo. Yeah. So you know, with how tough these last couple months have been, and again, for you and for everyone in the area, just everything that happened with Mo, can you just talk about that Thursday night, the Big Mo show, and what that meant to you and your career, and just the lasting effect that it'll have on you?
Yeah, man, because after the show was over, I sat out in front of his house, or his apartment in Glen Burnie, and I was exhausted. It was a long day. I had to set up all the equipment. I was stressed out that the equipment wouldn't work and that I would screw up that aspect of it, because that's not my forte. I've never set it up, but because of the coronavirus and everything was going on, I had to do it all. I had to produce the show, set it up, and then on the back end, Nolan was getting all the callers and guests and everything lined up. So I sat in the parking lot, just not realize, like, just taking it all in, because it moved by so fast. And to see Mo that day, he was so excited, and he had to take his medicine because he was in pain. And Eric, you know it as much as I do from going over there. His medicine would make him tired and kind of knock him out. So he even wrote, and it was so funny because he misspelled beauty. He posted on Facebook, "I got to get some beauty sleep before my big show." And he laid down, and he probably took maybe an hour, 45-minute nap. I just sat there playing video games while he was sleeping. And when he woke up, he was ready to go. And when the show ended, he took a little bit of bite of dinner that I brought over, and then he was out. And he was just, it's like, talking for 4 hours is a lot, especially with a 14-year-old kid who's going through what he was going through. And he does have the gift of gab. And a lot of that stuff was off the cuff, but the commercial breaks were so damn funny. And just some of the stuff he was saying, I was like, all right. Because he started off the show by honoring a friend of his that had just died from cancer. And he said, I want to, he picked 6 seconds of silence for him. And I said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you let me segue out of it? Because I've done that before, because sometimes it can be a bit of an awkward feeling to try to go from something that's down to up. So I'll say, oh, that's a really nice thing you did. And I said, well, let me tell you what we have coming up on the show to kind of segue out of it. He goes, oh, that's great. So in the commercial breaks, he was making fun of his mom, and because, we were joking with her, and he was just having a good old time, and the smile on his face, it didn't stop. And I'll never forget it, man. It's one of my favorite moments in my entire life. And I've got some cool things that have happened to me. But I'm still not, people will never know when I'm sad for the most part. I'm still not right. I'm still struggling immensely with this. It's one of those things that I'll never forget. I'm happy that I got to do all those things. And the odd thing is, people would come to me all the time and say, oh man, what you did for him was amazing, but they have no idea what he did for me. There's plenty of stuff that I was going through. Even when I got moved to nights, man, I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to just be out of radio. And I picked up a job doing roofs on the side, and I'm still doing it because I'd started making so much money doing it that I didn't want to give it up once the radio stuff really started kicking in. But, and then, to truth be told, people don't know how much I changed my schedule around, because what I do is I go out and I canvass these roofs. I look for damaged roofs. I started doing it in Glen Burnie and Pasadena and Severna Park, just so I could be near him and see him every day. So, he became, it started off as a caller and kind of like a kinship when I met him, and then at a point, because I coach kids all the time and I'm around them, it almost felt like my son. And then it felt like my little brother. And we became pretty tight, pretty close. He would text me all the time. I just miss him, so not to get overly emotional. And I know you guys have probably asked me 2 questions and I've rambled the entire time, but they were loaded questions, by the way. But no, I mean, with him, he's special. He's just, and seeing what everybody's saying about Vince Bagley just brought me back to him today, because all you have is people saying nice things about Mo, of course.
Now, real quick, I'll let these guys dive into some of the questions too. But I don't know if you know this. When you Google Jeremy Conn, do you know what the first 2 responses are? Like, Google automatically fills it in.
No.
Jeremy Conn wife. Jeremy Conn Mo Gabba.
My wife is the first one.
Jeremy Conn wife, the first one. I clicked on it too. I'm not gonna lie, I clicked on it. I've met Miss Katie before, but I just I wanted to see what was out there.
It's very attractive. That tired ass line of everybody, y'all kicked your coverage. Really?
Oh,
how'd you do that?
Insanely.
Yes.
It was, like I said, I sat with her. You were off talking to anyone and everyone at after Mo's funeral, and I got to sit at the table at Jimmy's with her and talk to her. So yeah, awesome lady, very nice lady.
She's great. She's a labor and delivery nurse at Hopkins, and constantly doing there's a lot that I've told a lot of the stories, but my wife and I, we talk about it all the time. We took 2 kids in. They're twins. One's in the Army. One got a full ride to play football at East Stroudsburg, and then the coronavirus hit, but he's going into the Marines when he finishes up in college. We took in a father and son, a guy I used to coach with. We let him move in with us. and she allows me to try to heal the world one step at a time, I guess. But I'm a bleeding heart, and so we try to do as much as we can. But she also puts me in check when it's like you can't save everyone. So
she is the straw that stirs the Jeremy Conn drink. I think we
absolutely
can say that.
Jeremy Conn wife. All right, I gotta look that up now.
Yeah,
maybe they're talking about my first wife because I've had two.
I don't know. I don't know.
You go back and forth.
I saw Miss Katie when I clicked on it. So
yeah.
Jeremy, how did your sort of sports fandom begin? Like you said, you were a numbers guy and you remembered everything, but where did this kind of love all come from? Because you're talking about 3 hours a night, so the love and the passion is there. Where'd that kind of spark from?
My family, everybody in my family, pretty good athletes. My brother was a phenomenal baseball player, and it's funny because I'm the black sheep in my family, like exact opposite of everyone else, except for probably our sense of humor. So, like my dad was a really good baseball player, started playing softball. My brother, phenomenal baseball player, started playing softball with him. They're both hunters, and I was just so different in my family. I didn't want anything to do. Like I played baseball up until I was like 13, and then I remember. My dad was like, I said I wanted to play tennis because I wanted to stay in shape because I was a basketball player. I told my dad I want to play tennis. He goes, "You're not playing tennis. It's a gay sport." And I'm like, "What? I mean, come on, Dad. No, it's not a gay sport." And he goes, "You're not playing tennis." And I said, "Well, I'll find a ride home every day." He goes, "All right, you can go ahead and play your gay sport." I said, "I'll try not to make out with any guys at practice today, Dad." Like stuff like that. That's our family and how we talk to each other. And the times are different then too. So I don't want to my dad is a bit of a jerk from time to time, but still. But no, like we all played a ton of sports, and then we moved into this neighborhood that had a basketball hoop on a cul-de-sac, just a hoop there, and I fell in love with it. I started going out. I was so short and so skinny. I'd have the basketball holding it with two hands and just kind of sling it up there, almost like a soccer throw-in, from the side of my head. And then I just started. I would be out there playing 8-10 hours a day and fell in love with the sport. So. In my house too, it was kind of weird. The only team we grew up with was the Orioles. My dad was a Steeler fan. The Colts had left town when I was 4 years old, so we had no kind of inkling of it as kids, and it wasn't taught in our house. But baseball, my dad would always order boxing matches, so I love boxing. He'd have every Tyson fight on. So I think it kind of stems there, and some of my more fond times are my dad coming to my games, no matter what sport I was playing. So that's where the love kind of starts. The numbers thing, I was just always good at math. Like I was always good at numbers. So when I went to Stemmers Run, when we lived in Baltimore County, I was in gifted and talented class. It's not to brag, but I mean, it was pretty cool.
You got to get it out there,
No, I took one of those nationwide tests and I finished in the 99th percentile or 95th percentile. And so if I'd have stayed in Baltimore County, I should have been taking Calc 2 like my senior year of high school. Instead, I took Calc 2 in college, but I didn't finish school, but numbers were always something that I liked and I tended to remember. So when we were talking about, this guy hit 301 this year, and then it started with colleges and where players went to school. Like that's my forte. Is we can sit here and go through NFL teams, and I can tell you where 75% of their players went to college. And that happened with basketball and some of the other sports. So I just kind of fell in love with it. But it's always been basketball, football, baseball for me, and then I would put boxing in there as well since I grew up with it.
Mike Sellers, old Redskins fullback. Where'd he go to college?
Don't even throw Mike Sellers at me. I don't know where Mike Sellers went.
Walla Walla Community College.
Mike Sellers.
That's the man.
Did you just look that up, or did you know that?
That is one that is stuck in my head.
Wow.
I will remember that till the day he dies. I have no idea why.
Yeah.
Where is Walla Walla Community College?
I don't know, but Mike Sellers
come
went
on,
there.
you got to keep going with that.
He went there. Now, you talked about the numbers and all that stuff, and being obsessed with those, and obviously I'm friends with you on Facebook, so I see all your statuses, and you're not going to escape these questions. And again, this kind of ties in with back to the Big Mo show in that week. That week, you chose right, and you picked some pretty good golfers for that draft or for the.
DraftKings.
Was it DraftKings?
Yeah.
Okay, so get into this kind of daily fantasy that you've really just exploded with. I mean, you've had a couple.
I've been playing. No, I've been playing since they started really, and then I lost a ton of money initially. Because you figure, hey, I'm a sports guy, I should know more about some of these other guys that are going to play that are just fans. No, because I listen to some of these daily fantasy podcasts, and the guys can't even pronounce the damn names of the players. And like I hear guys mispronounce names of players like nonstop. And they're like, yeah, I was watching that game last night. Well, no, you weren't, because they said the guy's name 12 times. Like at a minimum, you could hear it and understand how to pronounce. And I'm not even talking about hard names like Antetokounmpo or anything like that. I'm talking about for the years, they would call him Jonathan Shoup. It's Scope. Get it right, jackass. So but no, I started playing and then I started to dive more into the analytics and learning more and getting back into, as we're talking about numbers and what some of the statistics mean and trying to break things down. I've always had a gambling background. But the fact of the matter was once I started getting into that and realized really what you should be doing and some of the mistakes that average everyday people make, and it helps. And the reason I bring that up is because it's kind of odd that I won $138,000 playing golf on DraftKings.
Again,
I don't know anything about golf. I don't know anything. Like,
You said 138?
138,000.
Woo!
So then, and that weekend too, like as crazy as it gets, Bryson DeChambeau won that tournament. It was a little rinky-dink tournament. I didn't know any of the players on my team outside of him. Now I know a ton more about golf, but I really think the fact that I wasn't looking at names and I was looking at numbers and seeing what the best odds were for that particular golf course, that really helped me out instead of, sometimes you get your mind made up. It's like, oh, I got to play Ezekiel Elliott this weekend. Oh, he doesn't fit in there, but I'm going to make him fit. So I'll change up the bottom of my lineup and screw things up because your mind's telling you have to get that player when we really shouldn't even be looking at the name. So it's just a different thought process. And then 6 weeks later, I won $130,000 in the NBA and in a ticket to DraftKings Live Final, which because of the coronavirus, thanks a lot, there was no live final. It was virtual. So instead of getting a flight to San Diego or Puerto Rico or wherever the hell they were going to have it, and then I end up having to just watch it from my house. And they say, hey, here's a Zoom meeting. You can meet Larry Johnson. I'm like, screw Larry Johnson. Grandma, I don't need to meet him. It was him and John Starks. So they were like, yeah, you can get a Zoom meeting. And I'm going, that does nothing for me.
Here are the 90s Knicks.
Yeah. So then this past the first week of the NFL season, I won $60K. And then I won another $30K on golf again, including a ticket to their live final, which is during the Masters in November. But I think it's going to be virtual. Now, that being said, those are the big hits. Now, there has been plenty of money put back in. Do not get me wrong. When you're playing tournaments and trying to have the big hits, you might have 10 losing days in a row. I mean, it's just it's difficult. But the big ones are supposed to make up for it. It's like being Deshaun Jackson. You might have 3 catches, but those 3 catches might go for 45 plus.
Yeah, I've been playing for a long time myself, and I have a good understanding of it's all about building unique lineups. I know that if you look at what the most unique or the most optimal lineup is in hindsight of an event, it's always less than the max salary cap by a good margin. And then you look at the statistics of how many people own what lineups are comprised of. And so many people build their lineups to that full salary cap amount. And so the places where you find the edges are to kind of build lineups that are not all the way up to that amount.
Like, for example, if let's say you were going to take the Chiefs, right? And everybody knows that the 2 favorite targets there, you're going to a game, you expect it to be a shootout. And everybody's like, well, I want Pat Mahomes with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And then I'll bring it back with, whatever player. I'll bring it back with Keenan Allen if they're playing the Chargers. And so the way, let's say that was going to be the number 1 game on the board, the way to differentiate that is you can still keep Pat Mahomes, or you could go to the other side and take Justin Herbert and, Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry if you want, or however you want to stack it up, where more people are going to go the other route. So now if any one of those players fail and it's 60% owned, you're doing, you know what I mean? Like you're in
snowball.
Yeah. So it's this weird thought process to have. Now I prefer to play the big money games. Like I would rather play against 20 people and play in a tournament for $2,000 a person, as opposed to, putting 100 lineups in at $10 a person, or $10 an entry and try to compete with all these other guys. Just like the math that these guys have and the systems that they use are going to counteract all that. So I usually play in single entry tournaments because I feel like my edge is even with those guys at that point in time, or even better in some instances. But when they can MME, mass multi-enter, they're just so much better than you. And I've had single bullets in those big tournaments, like the Millie Maker, and finished in 570th place and won a little bit of money. But everybody trying to get that $1 million. Usually I'm not in those tournaments. So I'm in the bigger prize pool or bigger entry fee and less people, because I feel like my shot is better to win them.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Spinning off of the daily fantasy sports stuff, I noticed especially early in the quarantine or whatever you want to call it, saw you get into the liquor cabinet a little bit. I want to say we saw some Rumplemints in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right about that? And
I think we're seeing some stuff behind him too.
Can you see it?
All right, a little bit of a collection there.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I was on one of the Bet Sweat podcast for Entercom and CBS, and the guy's like, "What do you have all these twist off bottles before you? Do you drink anything that's?" And I'm like, "Dude, so I have a 12-year-old bottle of Whistle Pig, which is awesome. I've got an 18-year-old bottle of Jameson, and then I have the trashy stuff, because I actually found Malort, which I did shots of that with Glenn Clark on his show. Malort's the Chicago liqueur that tastes like somebody lit a match and threw it in your mouth.
That's exactly where I was headed. I was headed to the Malort question, because I've been there. Good friend White Sox Dave out in Chicago.
Oh, so you had it?
I've spent a couple nights out in Chicago, and I've had some of that grease. It's unique. I'll say that much.
Yeah, I've never. So the weird thing about Malort is, and we keep doing. We've already finished a bottle. So my friends and I, we torture each other whenever we get together. And we do shots. I mean, we pound, and it's childish, whatever. Like somebody's like, "Oh, you're bragging about how much you can drink." I said, "No, I'm just telling you how much I can. It's not no humble brag. It's embarrassing. I still have. I mean, I could lift this up during my show. I don't know if you guys want me to." And there was a guy that worked with a bunch of bartenders in town. He said, "Hey, I heard you're drinking during your show. Can you save any of the liquor bottles?" And I said, "Yeah, I got Jaeger, Rumpel, Jameson, all the cheap knockoff, Jim Beam Peach, Jim Beam Apple, like all the, stuff that I'd sit here to do shots with during the show." And he's like, "Oh yeah, save me those bottles. Those bottles are still sitting behind me. We're getting ready to sell our house." And there's like 15 of them I just drank an ungodly amount for the first 3 months. So I'm glad I didn't have Malort and try to finish one of these bottles myself. But what it does is you take the first, it's so bitter, it hits your tongue, and you're like, man, it's awful. And then you feel like it attacks the rest of your taste buds and keeps spreading throughout your mouth. And it's just, it's so bad. And I've done 3 shots of this on 5 separate occasions now. So it's awful.
I know exactly the feeling. It almost like runs through your entire body, and your body just kind of wants to quit on you.
Yeah, it's rough.
That's what we do our soju shots, Banks. That's tasty.
Oh no, that's delicious stuff.
That's our go-to.
What is it, soju?
Yeah. Very good. Very, very good.
No, I have. Sorry, I'm backing away. I have chum charum. My favorite thing to get drunk off of, which makes me sound. Can you see it?
Yeah.
My favorite thing to get drunk off of is sake. So I was.
Yeah, sake's good.
Yeah, and warm sake even more so than cold sake. But we were in Myrtle Beach on a family vacation, and the girl came over, went to a hibachi grill, and she was like, I told her I wanted sake. She goes, "You want the small sake or the large sake?" And I said, "Give me the large one." And she was showing me with her hands like this, and I said, "I'll finish it." She goes, "You're not drinking it with anyone else?" I said, "No." So she brought it out, and it was bigger than this. And I got it all the way down to the bottom, and my wife's looking at me. She's like, "You're not finishing that." I said, "I told her I would. I'll finish it. I want to finish it." So my wife was so mad at me because my goal instead of eating was just to finish this bottle of sake, a huge carafe of it.
We'll bring it back. We'll bring back some of the Baltimore sports here, Jeremy. Thoughts on the Ravens this weekend, spread and over/under?
I think they blow them out this weekend. Like, I love the fact that so they're coming off a game where they win by 2 touchdowns, and I mean they dominated the game. Even though I have some reservations about the pass rush and some of the things I've seen, I haven't been entirely happy with the coaching staff and some of the decisions that have been made, especially on the offensive side. But we'll leave that for another time. But I just think they dominated, and they're going to run the ball right down Cincinnati's throat. I think Burrow's been throwing the football so much. He's due for a couple of interceptions just by how much they have him throwing the ball. And so I like the Ravens a lot this week. And if I'm thinking the blowout, I'd rather take the over because when they tend to slam that gas pedal down, it just goes full bore. And but I think the Ravens, I think they run roughshod over them.
Sure. Sunday's official, Jerome Boger. Hear that you're a big fan of the guy. I'm a huge NFL referee guy myself. Why Jerome Boger? Why is he your guy?
Because of the way he talks. I mean, it's like, so the funny thing is I was in my friend has a phenomenal man cave with 5 TVs on the wall, and the main TV is the only one that has sound on. And I don't remember what game it was, but there was a huge call for fantasy implications on the lower TV, and it was Jerome Boger making the call. I said, I've heard that ref 1,000 times. I can tell you exactly what he's saying. He's like, after further review, it has been determined number 77 of the offense had granted his faith, man. You know, like, so I start doing that and they all started laughing. So I'm like, all right, I'll go try it out with Scott when I go to work. So I did the voice with Scott and he starts laughing. He goes, I know who you're talking about. Then that SOB ends up getting the Ravens Super Bowl game. So it's like, this is golden. So it was great for a long period of time. And I can't tell you how many times I run into somebody, they're like, hey, do Boger. I'm like, I'm here with my family trying to eat. This is a Chuck E. Cheese, sir. Do Boger. Yeah, so, but you get that a ton. I do like him. He actually came to town with the new rule changes that they had, and he was out at the facility, and I couldn't go out. So Coleman got him to have a couple of, say a couple sound clips, like, Jeremy, I'm watching you. And it was funny to hear him tell me a message, like, I'll hear that impersonation. I'm like, I don't know if I could say it in front of him or do it, because he'd look at me and want to slap me. He's like the nicest guy ever.
I was going to ask if he's ever – I've heard the cut on 105.7, but I didn't know how they got that, or I should have known that it was Coleman who got that.
Yeah, Coleman got it.
Yeah,
they wanted me to go out, but I couldn't because I forget the reason why I couldn't make it out to camp. Because I you know what it was? I was coaching my basketball camp here at Perry Hall, and I just couldn't make it work. And so Coleman went out and got the sound from him.
It's always tough to do the impression in front of the actual person that you're.
So when I was a kid, I felt that pressure because my mom was always like, so I did, when I was a kid, I would do like Barney Rubble and E.T. and, Pee Wee Herman and stuff like that. And then as I got older, it turned into Forrest Gump and Sling Blade. And my mom would have somebody over the house and she's like, do your Sling Blade. I told him how well you do the Sling Blade. And I'm like, what the hell is the Sling Blade? Like, just how she talks. My mom would call Cuba Gooding Jr. Cuba. And I'm like, the hell is Cuba? Like, so it's just funny because she would always put me on that spot and like, do this voice, do that voice. And I would get so embarrassed as a kid because in my mind, I'm going, what if they don't like it? What if it's terrible? And then after a while, I just started like, my mom's going to keep asking. So I just started letting my guard down. And I'd do it anywhere. But then you don't know if you still have those voices in you from like, somebody was like, hey, do Pee Wee Herman. I was like, I don't even remember if I could do that. Like think about his voice and his laugh. And then, I'm not even going to try it. But yeah, I was going to talk to John B. But anyway, stuff like that, I think stems from the childhood with doing voices. And I'd tell Scott too, because there were a bunch that I would do off the air. And when I worked with Wyman and even with Garceau, I think some of their favorites is when I would do some of my voices saying dirty things or things that I obviously couldn't say on the radio, and it would really get them going.
You're Coach K. Anytime you you and Kenny were together and you'd sign off with the Coach K was always that was my first.
That was the only thing. Like I don't even have I know how Coach K talks, but it was just that inference in his voice where he's like, I love Duke, and so I would try to do that over and over again. And
that is pretty tremendous.
Yeah. So it was just funny. And then it turned into, I don't know if you guys would notice it, but
I picked it up.
Sometimes instead of Coach K, it was say goodnight, Coach Gay. And you'd have to listen in real. I'm like, I love Kenny and I love Duke, so, but it's just, dumb stuff like that. And I'm trying to think if there were, I used to do a really good Kadri Ismail, and then we had Jeter call in, and he had him doing his Kadri Ismail. And then I always said I didn't want to do it on the air because I didn't want him to get pissed at me and think I was – because the whole thing that because I used to do a little podcast thing with Rocket Ismail. So I got really close with him, and they both talk the same way. It's like, well, let me tell you what's happening, and it's just that there's all these weird pauses in the middle of
one of the weird, such weird cadence, weird cadence. Yeah.
So, and then, when he was doing the games for the Ravens, he's like, hot sauce. Like, what the hell is he talking about? But yeah, so, I mean, there were a bunch of dumb ones over the year. And then Kenny would, the thing that I would always get Kenny laughing at when I did nights was I would do my Humpty Hump voice when anybody was on the TV. I was like, here's what's happening over here. And, so I'd start I'd try to mimic whatever the person's saying. And I would do that for every single person. And Wyman would just start laughing when we were coming back from a commercial break. And then you'd hear him laughing as he's trying to reintroduce the show again.
We got to get you on a stand-up stage.
I did it back in the day. So true story. The first time I did stand-up, I rocked the house. I only did like 5 minutes. Killed it. Like I didn't even go to sleep. I passed out at some point from exhaustion. Like I was just talking to somebody. I was like, yeah, today was so good. I was just out. And that's what they told me. I woke up in the morning. I said, did I get drunk? They said, no, you were just so high off your performance. No BS. 2 days later, go back, same exact set, go up on stage. Some woman just starts heckling me and yelling stuff. And I looked down, I was like, what the hell's wrong with her? I couldn't remember my material and basically got booed off the stage. It's the most embarrassed I've ever been in my life, and I pooped my pants as an adult. So, you know.
We were trying to establish a punishment for a fantasy football league me and Brian are in, and it was going to be slam poetry. Maybe we make it stand-up comedy, Brian.
Maybe.
And that is the embarrassing. Can you get through a stand-up comic act somewhere without getting heckled?
I mean, there's some open mic nights. That's a good one. I mean, I've seen a lot of people do the stuff on the corner with guys dressed up in drag or, you know
about
holding
that.
up. Yeah, holding up. Oh, did you do that?
No, I see you know about that.
Oh, I know about dressing in drag.
Yeah.
So I was one of my favorite leagues I was in with all my close friends. We were in a league called the Dress League. And what we would do is we would play like rotisserie, not head to head or anything. Like your statistics are adding up throughout the year. We had all these extra spots. There's like 8 of us in the league. And whoever finishes in dead last, week 17 or the first week of the playoffs, whatever we can make work for them, has to dress and drag, and every single person in the league gets to pick an accoutrement, which usually means some nylons, maybe some clip-on earrings, a G-string, definitely, high heels to walk around, and you have to serve beer to everyone in our league as a punishment, dressed up in drag. Somebody gets a wig, lipstick, whatever you want, and then they get their picture taken and put on the wall. So my whole thing was, and then, by the way, whoever finishes in first gets taken out for dinner wherever he wants to go. So we get a cool guys' night out of it, and that person doesn't pay for a dime. And we go wherever he wants to go, and you have a good night. But I kept telling him, I said, well, I'll never finish in last. Didn't pay attention to the league, never expected anything to happen. My team, all my guys were getting hurt, finished dead last, so I had to do it. So they had me up on that wall, and I'll never forget it because somebody put the G-string in water and then threw it in the freezer before I had to put it on. So it was some tough sledding early on. Yeah.
That's tough. That's a tough way to serve. Jeremy, thanks so much for coming on with us. The host of The Lowdown on 105.7 from 6 to 9 every weekday. I appreciate you coming on. Sure to have you on again. Awesome.
Anytime, guys. Yeah. Sorry if I talk too much.
No, you're good. And thanks for putting these 2 guys with me on the radio. They deserve it, and giving all those people opportunities. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.